Yay!
Will you give me a thumbs up when you see it?
Yep.
Because we're streaming.
And streaming live on Facebook.
All right. Wow, great. Well, welcome everyone to another evening of HeartMind Happy Hour, evening in Lander, Wyoming, where I'm streaming from. This is HeartMind Happy Hour. I'm Holly Copeland, your host, and I am really excited for today's conversation with Constantine Georgiou and Stephen Altair. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you, Holly.
Yeah. And today I have a really special conversation. We are going to be talking about conscious leadership in the 21st century. And Constantine especially has been working as an entrepreneur. He's an incredible history of working in the entrepreneurial field, has helped over 400 startups, which was just incredible, and has seen sorry, somehow I've got this going here. Has seen an incredible trend where those businesses that incorporate consciousness into their business model are far more successful. And so he's a wonderful person today to speak to us about his ideas for how to transform businesses and leadership through consciousness. And really, really excited to hear his ideas. He's founded something he calls Conscious Accelerator, and we'll talk about that a little bit too at the end. So welcome, Constantine.
Thank you, Holly, and feeling very grateful for being invited and having the opportunity to have this conversation during these times as well. So thank you.
Yeah. Absolutely. And indeed, this is a really prescient time to be discussing leadership with so much change in the world. Clearly, this is going to be a time where a lot of businesses go away, don't make it, and the ones that can incorporate principles like conscious leadership will be able to thrive. And so I think this is a really, really wonderful time to bring this specific conversation to the fore. And these really neat ideas that you've put together. So excited to hear what you have to say. And of course, also have the wonderful Stephen Altair, sort of a regular guest here on this show. Welcome, Stephen, who is an author and a teacher, and a friend, and really you have an incredible resume as well, working in fields of counseling, alternative health, businesses, in education. So you've really got a broad breadth and depth as well to bring to this conversation. So I think you're a perfect person to discuss how you see conscious leadership in the world. So you're on mute, Stephen.
Maybe a good place to put me. Keep me right there on.
Oh no.
There's like Constantine, I'm deeply grateful to be here and have this opportunity to share. So thank you, Holly, and thanks, Constantine. It's really at this time. It's really, really important to have this message heard wide and clear. So around this planet, we need awakened leaders, and we need leaders to sit up and listen to. So thank you. Yeah,
we absolutely do. And I guess I just want to put out a blessing there that this conversation, that we reach those people who it will benefit, and benefits all beings who are on this path towards consciousness and awakening. So I think a really great place to start in this beautiful conversation is just, Constantine, you have all this experience and these ideas about leadership. So what is it that you see is wrong with leadership today? Where have we gone so off track?
Good question. There are two ways I'm going to answer that question. The first one is that these unprecedented times is putting a lot of pressure on leaders around the world. So there's I feel a lot of compassion for leadership in the face of VUCA, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity to the power of 10 right now, especially when because I'm still very engaged in the ecosystem, the startup ecosystem, and in the leadership ecosystem. Everyone's looking for answers. Everyone's looking for trends. It's really difficult to get a sense of what we can control right now. And typically, most humans, when they're in that situation, they will default to an unconscious way of being and react versus respond. So firstly, there's that. So external circumstances that are unprecedented and uncertain. And then the other one is that there's been a progressive growth, especially over the last 20, 30 years of, the whole dialogue around leadership versus management. And unfortunately, from what I've observed personally, directly, and through a lot of research, a lot of organizations still use management paradigms and not leadership paradigms. The reality is that no one likes to be managed, and management has never worked. I'm sorry. I know this flies in the face a lot of management consultants out there, but everyone that I've asked when we talk about leadership, and I'm talking about, CEOs of large international organizations, will end up having the conversation or the dialogue of, when was the last time you liked to be managed, Mr. or Mrs. CEO or Miss CEO? And they'll stop and go, oh, never. There's your answer. And I think, conscious leadership is more important now than ever before because of all these circumstances. And I think what's wrong right now is exactly that we're triggered, and most leaders are reacting, not responding. And you can also see it in the way, and I think I saw a study that came out recently that said, if we did some kind of, as a blunt tool, an assessment on global leaders, whether they're governmental or political or corporate or startup related, if we put them through some kind of psychometric evaluation to identify where they are in their path of self-awareness, let's play it with self-awareness, then we could vet out the narcissists, sociopaths, who just don't have a really good way of responding or reacting. That could be damaging to many people. And I'm not going to make any commentary on the current, global leaders, but that would be an amazing gate to put in place and really easy and effective. And then from a compassionate perspective, provide guidance and support to those people who have narcissistic and, sociopathic tendencies, because there's nothing more dangerous than an unconscious sociopath in a position of power that is meant to be representing the interests of not just their investors or not just their voters, but the whole world. And this is what we need moving forward. And the great Dan Brown, was interviewed on something like this with regards to what does the world need, and he said qualitatively more enlightened leaders in power. And things will just change because, there's an assumption under that term enlightened. The assumption the assumption that I have here is the way I define it as someone who really understands the ground of reality, the ground of your being, and that we are totally connected, and that there is a responsibility for others. And by having that direct experience of the correlationship between me and you, without going into non-duality, then all of a sudden you have this opportunity to serve in a much more meaningful way as a leader. And that's what I find is missing. And typically in my experience, and has been having been exposed at a very deep level across incubators and accelerators, where I ran some programs and got exposed to running 12-hour boot camps. This is not like 10-minute pitches, 12-hour boot camps across 400 entrepreneurs, early stage startups, what I noticed was that the ones that I liked, I would always keep a bit of a scoreboard of my top 10. And I would track them over the years, and then I would analyze what was it that I liked in them, because those top 10 have been successful over the last 5 years and are actually doing really well right now. And it comes down to consciousness. They're just more conscious about their role, the impact they can make, not only for in the market, but for their employees and their employees' families and their customers and their customers' families. They have this view that is much bigger than their own, goal of being a unicorn billion-dollar company and I'm going to be a millionaire. It's much more than that. It's more generative. It's also about looking at what is the impact on my kids' kids. And I think that's really important. And all of a sudden the view goes from me to we, or as Dan Siegel says, MWE. And this is what is required. And I think the current pandemic is an opportunity for us to look at new models, new ways of compensation, new ways of collaboration. So, I just had a full day yesterday with members of Singularity University who are all about, exponential growth to try and achieve goals associated with the United Nations Sustainability Development Goals, 17 of them. So, and they're all in agreement. The collaboration is number one, and there's no individual that's more important than the whole. And so we're, it's really exciting to hear these conversations. These are from very wealthy, backed by very wealthy and very intelligent and accomplished individuals and communities who are wanting to do good. Because we're not going to get through this individually. We're going to get through this together.
Yeah. Oh, that's beautiful. It's a beautiful answer. And I certainly in my own experience, I was in the nonprofit corporate world for 20 years. And the leaders that I saw came and go that had the qualities of compassion. And to me, it was about compassion and kindness and this big view, as you talk about. The collective and seeing us all kind of working together. I mean, in some senses to me, it seems so obvious, but it's interesting how easy it is for people to lose sight of those qualities.
Yeah, I mean, look, we're all complicit in this. And I ran my own little, I'm always my own test subject, my own study around, wow, why am I so zen and so happy outside the office? And as soon as I step in the office, I have this pain body take me over, and I get into this me and got to be, I'm not enough and I have to prove out. So there's a lot of unconscious stuff that we've adopted without any inquiry, without any, conscious awareness added to it to kind of go, is this valuable? Mm-hmm. And then as a result, when you adopt that view, you operate from, you behave from that view. And so, and this comes down to, I think conversations we've had before around the workplace is one of the most unsafe places to be vulnerable, open, compassionate, kind. It's dog eat dog world. But it doesn't have to be. And when you add awareness to it, and when you can have an organization where leadership makes it safe and inclusive to have open conversations about what's actually happening. I was in a full day summit 2 weeks ago with 20 highly mobile and accomplished individuals who are, and the objective of the summit was what's going on and what can we do about it. And it was an amazing event, and we went through a lot of different topics and whatnot. And in the end, where we rested on, where we left it was, we actually have to be responsible for our own level of awareness and consciousness. So how about we run a retreat and learn new ways of being and new ways of navigating uncertainty? And it was amazing to see how that's where it ended. Because, we could talk about what's wrong and what's right and what should happen and what we're predicting in the economy and healthcare and all that kind of stuff. In the end, I pointed back to, can you show me where the economy is? Can you show me where healthcare is? Can you do anything about it? No. So then why are we here sitting navel gazing, talking about things we can't control? Being a Stoic, I'm very passionate about only worrying about the things we can't control. And so in the end, we ended up getting to a point that the only thing we can control is what's going on between here and understanding our mind and hacking that experience, growing that experience, developing that experience, and going from this unconscious, narrator and judger to heart mind. And it was amazing to see the shift in the room for that to happen. So that gives me a lot of confidence. And to finish what I was saying before, so wouldn't it be amazing where a maturity of consciousness in leadership was a competitive advantage? That would just use the economic engine for, in terms of capitalism, whatever you want to call it. I mean, that's going to change it. That's obvious. That it'll flip the whole dynamic on its head, from making the workplace unsafe to making the workplace really safe, because that the bottom line is definitely impacted by more awareness and consciousness at work.
Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh. Yes, absolutely. And I love your and I'm so glad you brought into the discussion this shifting the view from sort of these external things that you can get wrapped up in talking about to, well, what can we really control? And coming back to individuals and our own mind. I couldn't agree with you more. Stephen, how do you see this? And I'm particularly curious, both what's wrong with leadership, and also how you define consciousness in leadership.
Sure. Look, thank you. And Constantine, thank you. Such beautiful words, and the intention is so powerful. And if I can address a number of things that you've brought up and that we're discussing, you've mentioned volatility in consciousness. So if we're trained to see ourselves as separate and in a competitive situation, then that's pretty much how we're going to react to volatility and uncertainty, is from our habit patterns. And you mentioned that as well. So we have to look really close. Our education system and our corporate culture, and in fact, the general training, as you've mentioned, all the way through to management, actually doesn't deal with the fundamental root or problem, and that's the identity, I. So we don't view this situation at the moment, for example, with the coronavirus and all the havoc, we don't see it as one humanity. We're still dealing with it as separate countries. There are still all these divisions. And so there is not right across the world one humanity statement. There is not an agreement between all the leaders. And you've mentioned about unenlightened leadership, Constantine, and you can see very clearly the way different countries and represented by their leaders have responded to it. And it's generally not as one humanity. It's all based out of fear. And the majority of businesses relate to business out of fear. They're relating to it from the identity of the individual, the identity of the business, that corporate drive is all based around competitive advantage, and competitive advantage is based on separateness and certainly not on one humanity. And it's not based either on enlightened leadership. So if you look at what, you've mentioned enlightened leadership and the we consciousness and collaboration. If you look deeply into what that really means, then it actually all starts with a concept in Buddhism called bodhicitta. And that means that we are going to, as a world, develop businesses that are for the benefit of all living creatures. that we treat our animals as part of our family, that we treat human beings as part of our one family, and we treat the planet as part of our family. Therefore, you are not going to be developing businesses any longer. The new awakened business model has to have bodhicitta, which is developing businesses for the benefit of all, as the competitive advantage. That has to be the reason that you get into business. And when you do that, you start to let go of all the divisive old ways of doing business, which are competition and division, because you want to awaken in everybody that's part of business their true nature, and the true nature that's innate in all of us. So you need, right from the beginning, a good, pure, simple motivation, which is that you're going to benefit all living beings. So, for example, if you look at technology, as we've progressed, what have we done with technology? We've used it to harm and kill animals and humans. I mean, there is no better example of the way that we have abused our planet and each other and our animals than technology. So we've actually lost the reason why we're here. Why are we here? To love. If we do not have that as part of the culture right across the world, in every corporate training module, it should all begin with love. It should all begin with benefiting others. When we do that, then, for example, at the beginning of your day with your staff, instead of deciding how you're going to make the next top dollar, you actually begin with a dedication. You begin with your staff spending the first part of their day dedicating their business practice and their activities for the benefit of all. So exactly as you were saying, Constantine, you start to bring love and compassion right at the heart of the entire world culture, of the entire business culture. So you start from a different premise. You can only start from love and compassion if you have a deep understanding of the identity, the I, and then you make the intention to follow through with that. And you deeply immerse yourself in what essentially is a reverse view of the entire planet. You suddenly are born into a planet and an understanding and an experience and a realization of oneness and we and not I. And that would completely change the dynamics, because the way that we would begin our days practically, the way that we would begin our news items. I mean, we just look at the news and all it does is it constantly, it encourages fear, reaction, divisiveness. We do not start with loving, compassionate news, or news that's identitylessness, has identity less at its heart, and is looking at enlightened news, or looking at examples of enlightened leadership, or looking at examples of our one humanity. So we're constantly being fed. So it's not just corporate culture we've got to look at. And you've mentioned the economy, Constantine. You know, what economy? That is a brilliant question. You know, where does the identity of the economy lie? It's actually, at the moment, in an incredibly divisive world. So you have to flip the nature, not just of corporate culture, but of the economy and of social structure, religions. You start to look at the whole way that we have set up what essentially is a world full of division. And when you get back to developing, you know, not just business, but the way that we live as being for the benefit of everyone and being for the benefit of all living creatures, and you actually make that, you can't intellectually say that and then not do it. So it has to become part of every culture. So that to me is a really simple base from which to work from for enlightened leadership, is bodhicitta, love, compassion, powerful intention, and a business culture that's not based on the individual any longer, but is truly based on the oneness of humanity. So that's a beginning.
Yeah, I agree. And it's interesting being involved in a few founder support groups where the term love comes up, and it's interesting to see some of the reactions. And I think this is there's separateness of individualism, but there's also separateness in work life. And, you know, at work, no room for love. You know, you can do whatever you want outside that, you know, outside. But the reality is it's not true at all. And I've definitely been complicit in unconsciously, you know, buying into that in my life. But I noticed, you know, in my direct experience was my first successful business was a company called Veltio, which was an innovation house. And we wanted to have a culture of safety and inclusion where we all, including me, the CEO, walk the talk and lived out of values that were generative in the pursuit of flow for everyone. And, you know, with deep care for our employees and their families. And, you know, we were very successful in, that was my first direct experience of trying to operationalize this intention. The intention of this session here is, and we had a lot of success. I mean, don't get me wrong, it was, you know, 8 years ago, and we had zero attrition. You know, in a tech company in Australia where everyone's constantly trying to poach talent from other companies, they were getting offers, but they didn't want to leave, you know. And the way we did that, the way we operationalized that, we had some, you know, things that made it practical. I didn't want any doubters in the company. So if you came to me with a competitive offer, I would pay you $5,000 to leave, because I don't want any doubt here. And I would say, with love, here's the check, $5,000, take the job. You will be back in 3 months. Seriously, no one ever took it because they went, whoa, that's what? I said, because depending, everyone has a different life stage and different, you know, career paths. But, you know, how do you operationalize these things? And this is one of the challenges. And I think that there's a lot of bottom-up things going on at the moment. There's, you know, people are downloading apps and learning how to do mindfulness-based meditations, and that's great. That's a bottom-up movement. But if it's still unsafe to be at work, we need to change things from the top. And if we can show the bottom line economic benefit of having more awareness and consciousness at work, and changing the view from quarterly performance bottom line bonuses to much more longer based generative goals, that's one of the easier way to do that. You know, starting meetings with some kind of anchoring and just grounding and being present versus being triggered. There's so much fear in the workplace, so much fear. And you know, one of the ways to figure out the level of consciousness in an organization, for me, is really simple. What is the maturity of the speak up culture? How much speak up is going on from the bottom? And if there isn't any, then there's too much fear, because I'm fearing of losing my job by speaking up to the CEO. You know, don't get me wrong, it's easy to get caught up in your own, you know, grandiosity and ego as CEO or executive, whatever, senior vice president, whatever it might be. So it is a constant conscious battle to knock yourself down and ask for robust, direct authentic feedback, so that you can learn the impact that you're having on others. You know, it's an interesting study from 2017 showed that when leaders showed stress and reaction from stress, that 50% of their employees didn't want to follow them anymore, didn't want to trust them anymore, and actually fell into more stress, you know, trauma-based kind of stress, because they're going, wow, if the leader's freaking out, that means I got to freak out, because he's probably not, they're probably not telling me everything, and my job is at risk. Yet those organizations who had deployed mindfulness-based courses to teach metacognition, where there was more hope, optimism, and, yes, things are uncertain, but that's fine. We'll deal with it, and we'll just take an agile approach to solving problems. That those organizations increase their ability to be creative, innovative, and pivoted, especially in the last 4 months, pivoted their business models to make it relevant to what is the current climate, the corona climate, which therefore impacted their survivability and sustainability. Those organizations who buried their heads in the sand for literally 2 or 3 months are the ones that are falling behind now, because they don't want to listen to what's happening. They're not present. All they're doing is imagining banking that bonus based on what they committed 6 months ago. Those business plans are gone, absolutely gone. And this is what happens when you work, so this is what I'm trying to say is that how do we integrate consciousness within the seemingly pragmatic and fixed MBA-based approach to running a business or an organization? I'm sorry, awareness exists everywhere. There is nothing without awareness. Therefore, the opportunity is actually so huge to add awareness into the organization. We were blown away by in Veltio by what we attracted. $1 million of funding from Salesforce Ventures out of the US. Being acquired by a company, having offers from 3 companies, purely because of our culture. We didn't develop any IP, any gizmos, any gadgets. We just implemented Salesforce and did transformational projects in a very unique way. And one of the biggest compliments that we got was many customers would say, how do you build a team of people who think and act like owners? And I said, it's about giving them empowerment to feel that they are owners, they are co-owners. And so that's really important. So just in that little piece there, we've addressed, ownership, leadership, engagement flow, how we go to market, how we transition, take the current data of what's going on and being in the present to actually continue to serve the demand that is rapidly changing. You can't do that without awareness.
It seems to me, Constantine, like you're speaking about something that's certainly more than just. So it's really teaching leaders first is one thing I'm hearing you say. I mean, it sort of has to happen at all levels of a company, but it has to happen at the leadership level first, because they set the tone. And there's a lot, certainly in the world of consciousness and mindfulness floating around out there, whether we're talking about apps, whether we're talking about teaching people mindfulness, whether we're talking about flow and stealing flow. And these things are bandied around, and there's podcasts with all these ideas floating around. But it actually seems to me like you're speaking about something that's quite specific, that is more than just teaching our leaders to use a mindfulness app. Yeah. It's actually quite more comprehensive than that. What is it? Not
the metaphor. The metaphor I
give your.
No, I get it. But the metaphor that I use is coming in with a beautiful torchlight of awareness and shining it in where there's darkness in business, and saying we can add awareness here, we can add awareness there, we can add awareness there.
Yeah.
And, by simple inquiry, and I also kind of going, okay, what is the impact of you not, I've heard some amazing cringy stories around large organizations making decisions in March, April, where they got rid of 30% of their staff so that they can continue to pay bonuses to their executives. And these are companies that are highly respected, that I won't mention here. And that is a very unconscious move. That company's existence is now on a stopwatch. Because do you think that 30%, and there was like thousands of employees, do you think those employees are going to go quietly? And the leadership team, one of the things that they shared was that they talked, the CEO was asked, okay, what do we do now, and his response was, cash is God. And this is a principle-based organization on paper, positioning themselves in leadership.
Yeah.
And that is A, fear-mongering, and B, so unconscious that, and I've got this from a good source, that the people who remained on the boat are now looking to get off the boat because they saw what they really stand for. And so when that is the case, right, those organizations, so actually the paradigm shift is happening already. Those organizations who take a conscious approach to leadership, it automatically attract those people who want something more than just cash is God. Right? I mean, this is happening anyway.
I totally agree. Yeah, Constantine, I totally agree with you. I just, referring back to the company that you started that had that people valued because of the culture. So I was the same. I've started 4 companies over, my business lifetime, and the ones that were successful and the ones that were acquired, similarly to you, were all because of the culture. So what going back to your sense of giving people ownership, it is really incredibly important that people have a faith and a devotion in the company. In other words, that the company leadership, the enlightened leader, actually generates in each person and the company itself the kind of interest and time and faith in the individual's purpose as well as the group purpose. So they take time to get to know that. And I'm sure that's what you did, and that's what I did too. And the people that worked for me over those years, they never wanted to leave. They always said that. They said, we're never ever leaving this. It's like a family. And you mentioned about that division between work life and family life, that it's so crucial that people feel the same safety at work as they would with their own families. I mean, why should it be any different? It should, in the times when we used to work in communities in our villages, there was that safety. We all worked with each other. Now it's got, divided, and it's outside that because of the type of migration into the major cities. So if enlightened leaders take time to get to know the individual's purpose, not just the group purpose, then suddenly they will realize, like everybody else, we're all interested in the meaning of life and in happiness. But happiness itself never comes from chasing external objects. It comes when we turn inwards, that whole idea of interoception, or moving to the inner life and understanding what's going on for a purpose, for a person there. So you also mentioned about, the taking time to shine the light in the darkness. I totally agree with you. Part of every corporate culture should be the obstacles, understanding not just what are the obstacles in the corporate culture, but what are the obstacles for people. So when you actually take time to learn the corporate view as well as the individual view, and starting to feel all the obstacles that people deal with, if people are dealing with fear, uncertainty, and the example you gave of people valuing cash over, of leaders valuing cash over people is, a classic example of what obscures the view, of what actually puts blinders on top of our leaders. So, and any move like that is going to obstruct people's innate essence. It's going to stop people from being, and that's what companies are going to realize. So, I think the cultivation of simple values and virtues like generosity and support, and that classic statement of taking refuge. Taking refuge can mean taking refuge in the support of a community, and we've got to know and feel that the company we work for is worth taking refuge in. That there is a level of faith and trust in which you obviously developed, and which I believe I developed. And over the years that I worked, probably a brilliant example of this was I was part of an organization associated with Sri Aurobindo, an ashram and a business community and a school, and just the entire it was like one whole organism working as well. There was no differentiation between the spiritual practices, the business community, the community itself. So you'd have business leaders coming into the community to work with people in the community and working within the schools, and vice versa. The kids were quite free to move in and out of, you know, the companies from a very early age. And I saw that practically, you know, because we're also talking here practically about, I saw how practically that local idea of us supporting each other in community could really work. It was incredibly beautiful. One of my very fond memories of being in India. So, you know, so coming back to you, that culture, that kind of family, that faith in the family or in the community, that being able to take refuge in the company and actually know that you have the unequivocal support of the leadership. I mean, that provides the kind of safety features that you're talking about that are so crucial in our world. Yeah. So I thoroughly endorse what you're saying. It's so deeply true.
To your point there, Stephen, trust is at an all-time low, especially in institutions and organizations. And it's a real concern. And, you know, when that's the case in your, you know, human experience, when trust is low, what happens?
Oh, totally. Oh, Holly, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, people leave.
If you don't trust me, is that open or closed for you? Do you experience that as open or closed?
Well, certainly closed.
So how is that going to help us create and collaborate and innovate?
That you basically can't. It stops. Yeah.
So you're actually...
It's right at the, trust is so crucial because it's right at the core of that identity that we create. We have, you know, when you truly understand how to go beyond identity, you also realize that naturally we adopt identities, like in a sales team or in a marketing team. We adopt even as an enlightened leader, there is an identity we adopt. But if there's no trust, then there's no trust to fulfill those roles fully. With wholeness, there's a fear at a certain point of your engagement with the culture. So you can't, trust naturally is going, or lack of trust is going to breed that divisiveness, and also it undermines confidence to such an extent that the individual, out of fear, stays locked in a particular identity, is no longer free to play and liberate themselves in this vast world of infinite possibility. I mean, when you consider it, there are so many infinite possibilities available for companies right now, because our world is waking up and it's looking very, very closely with that searchlight you were talking about on all the dark places. So we can wake up big time. But if there's fear or a lack of trust, that like you said, that the company's going to get rid of a percentage of their company purely for the dollar, then there is no really deep confidence. And that is going to force an individual just to say, okay, well, I'm going to stay in this role. I'm going to adopt this identity. It's too fearful to actually explore or liberate or even to look at ownership of enlightened leadership in myself, because there's no encouragement of that. So I truly agree with you.
So sorry, go ahead, Constantine.
I was just finish on that. Trust is very, very close to faith. So if you don't have faith in your leadership, then what are you doing? Right? And if leaders don't have faith in their teams and trust their teams, then that's just a recipe for more suffering and bankruptcy. And I know I'm conscious that we're talking about conscious leadership, and it's not just about in business. It's just that my exposure and my careers have been heavily swayed from that. But what I'm saying is that there's so much opportunity to shine awareness and add consciousness into that domain. And those organizations who have been successful on many different scales. It's not just about profitability, but they sustain shifts in economic drivers and customer preferences and how they go to market. They're definitely legendary brands who will always be around, and who really, honestly, authentically care about their customers and their employees and the following generations. And that's what we need. We just need to wake up in business, wake up in leadership, and not treat people as a means to an end. I still have pretty close relationships with all the previous employees that I got involved with previously, because I truly cared about them, and I still do. The biggest thing that hurt me was caused suffering for me was actually selling the business and stepping down and walking away from that. I needed therapy for a year. And I actually questioned, what is the purpose of all this money if I'm actually feeling this pain? I'm never going to do that again. And that, as someone who's just stepped down as the head of venture capital, that is anathema, right? Yeah. What are you saying?
Now, Constantine, that brings up a really great question, which is something you've alluded to before, and I'd like to ask you about, and that's about the fact that we're all complicit in this, right? And how do we go about helping choose and helping understand enlightened leadership? So I'll give you an example, just a metaphorical example. So you can look at different political systems in different countries, and enlightened or unenlightened leaders can often be chosen, sometimes dependent on something as fine as a swing state. So a swing state goes one way and one leader gets chosen. Swing state goes the other way, the other leader gets chosen. Like, it can come down to the wire like that. Now, obviously, this is not a very enlightened way to be choosing enlightened leaders, because it can be actually so, it's almost like dependent on the throw of a dice, or how somebody, you get a small population.
Well, it's not democracy. It's not democracy.
Correct. So how, in your mind, how do we stop being so complicit? Because you can definitely say that in that undemocratic, system, that we're all complicit, because we've all bought into it, we're all part of it, and we haven't stood up and said, hey, this simply isn't working. Look what's happening to our leadership. They're not being, you mentioned compassion for our leaders at the moment. They're actually being not supported in this, because they're clearly unfit for the job. They're not ready for it. They're not in a state of enlightened leadership, and they can get, voted in and then put in under situations of extraordinary pressure and not know how to deal with it. So how do we deal with this? Because this is, as you said, it's not just in business, it's in politics, it's in all levels of the economy. If you look at any one group at the moment, you look at the EU and the divisions that are coming up in there. You look at the relationship between America and China and the UK and Canada, Australia, and New Zealand at the moment. You look at these kind of divisions that just, it's almost like we're not learning. We're going around this wheel, and so we're complicit in it. And I'm including all of us. We're all complicit because we're all part of this. And the entire world hasn't stood up as one humanity and said, stop. None of you leaders are dealing with this as one humanity. You're all arguing, bickering, divided. And in fact, you come out of systems where you're chosen in a divided way. Because, for argument's sake, if there's almost equal democratic, if there's almost an equal vote, maybe you should put two presidents into power and let them actually learn how to deal with each other and deal with all those conflicting points of view, and actually come to a sense of, union, because really all of this is heading to union. So how do we stop being complicit, and how do we come to, a difficult way. How do we actually select these enlightened leaders? And especially, dealing with this question, not just from business, but right across the world, because I was in a discussion some months ago where they had a number of activists, especially with some of the divisions that have come up in society over, various points of views and diversity and so on. And one of the activists made a brilliant point. He just said, it's not just about activism of any particular culture or race. It's actually right across the board. You've got to start looking at the economy, because the economy has to be unearthed, because there is no real stability in our economy. The stock market can be anything one day and anything the next day. The power and the money is held by that tiny percentage. So there are all these levels where we've got to look at enlightened leadership. So you've quite rightly said, not just in business, but right across our world. So how do we stop being complicit, and how do we deal with enlightened leadership so that it does impact the systems we've got, not just in our economies, but in our political system and our religious systems and any of the systems that we have valued for so long that clearly do not work in the way that we had originally intended them to.
That's a big question, and I'm tempted to answer it in the way I answered, the topic on, what's the economy going to do? Well, I can respond as a Stoic and say, well, I can't do anything about that. Or I can look at it and say the easiest solution for right now, until we figure out something more, is to to address the topic you just raised, is to bring in a diagnostic that basically assesses what is the maturity of your leadership. That is not just about not just the pragmatic things, but the consciousness that you bring to your decision making, to the way you see others, the way you see the problems, and the way you see the future. There's none of that happening. Anyone can be the president or the prime minister or the leader of anything. You just get voted in, and if you're charismatic and can play the game enough, you can get into power. That is scary. I mean, hold on. Our civilization isn't just 200 years old. And I'm sure the Greeks didn't think that this was what democracy was going to look like. If the question is, how do we stop and do something about it? The simple answer I will give is a U-turn. Each individual needs to take a U-turn and capture and have agency of their awareness, and how am I complicit in this, and what can I do about it? Learn about the nature of their mind, upgrade the mind through practices, learn, use biohacking tools to kind of really understand. One of the biggest insights that I had when I first got my Muse headset 2 years ago, this is the new one, but the older one, was I thought I was a good meditator until I got biofeedback. That was a moment of awakening, because I went, well, I've been kidding myself for 15 years. Wow, what an opportunity, because it's been pretty good anyway, but now it's going to be even better. And the last 2 year progress has been amazing. So I've shown awareness on my practice, shown awareness on where I'm coming from, shown awareness on how I treat others. I think the answer is we all have to just take an about face and see where we are complicit in the problem, understand that there is another way of being to solve these problems, and especially with the last 3 or 4 months in lockdown, and having your guidance, Stephen, I've really had a direct experience of, this is the answer. Having a direct experience of who you are, not the misidentified sense of self, but that we are totally connected, and that life can be much, you can get through life with much less effort. It can be effortless. And I've had enough direct experiences of these things as someone who's, you know, in the financial services industry, having these conversations with high net worth investors, right? And I'm amazed at the responsiveness, totally amazed. And so sometimes I feel that I'm complicit in thinking that they're not going to get it because this is not a financial services conversation. But now I've had enough evidence to go, I'm not going to be the one that's complicit. I'm bringing this topic up now. And I don't care if I get sacked. I don't care. That's fine. There's so many opportunities. And I want to be at the front end of the shift, and hence the initiative behind the Conscious Accelerator, which is about quantifiably, not just as a subjective experience, but quantifiably and objectively being able to take entrepreneurs, leaders of all walks and all domains on a journey to have the kind of experiences that I've had, to recognize the shift, that I am complicit in everything I put out there and everything I let in. And there's no doubt that there is a spiritual warfare going on at the moment, and it's front and center on our attention. There's a lot of evidence on that online in terms of how all the apps are hacking our dopamine, you know, receptors and creating behaviors and further reconfirming our individuality. Because look, I have a Facebook profile and I've got a lot of followers and whatever, Insta famous and blah blah blah. Really, can you actually show me how that makes you happy? Unconditionally, forever? Or is it just the next dopamine hit that continues to further the addiction to individuality? Oh, that came from nowhere, but I like that.
I like it. I like it too. And look, you really did answer that beautifully by saying, I'm going to stop being complicit. Like, I'm going to make a decision to say, no, I'm actually not going to be complicit anymore. I am actually going to ask the question. I'm going to say, this simply has got to stop. I think the moment you do that, you engage in that ancient practice of shamatha, or stop, so that you can get insight. If you just keep rolling on with the same old, then you are complicit, because you're literally deciding that those are, you know, the qualities that you endorse. And the moment that you do that, because I do think the quality, you know, those are measurables like love and joy and compassion and equanimity. If they're not part of our base, then so something, you know, there's like you mentioned about having some kind of gauge, or having some kind of measurable a diagnostic against which you measure leadership. So if leadership is not acting, so you could take any leader on our planet, say, so are you acting with love, compassion, joy, and equanimity in what you're having to do? No matter how much you might feel pain and suffering, because undoubtedly you will, because there's people in your country suffering. But are you acting out of genuine compassion, not for yourself, not for what you believe in, but genuine compassion for the one humanity that you're dealing with? Then there's an entirely different way. And then they're stopping being complicit, because they're stopping saying, hey, my votes matter, or my reputation matters, or who I am matters. No, it doesn't matter at all when you're an enlightened leader. You genuinely act out of true compassion. And
And look, it takes a lot of devotion.
It does.
Holly?
Well, I think, yeah, such a great conversation. And I too loved your answer about, you know, really starting with yourself, with having that acknowledgement of, I am not going to be complicit anymore. And had my own sort of personal realization of a similar ilk, you know, not that long ago, of really deciding to change. So I really appreciate that. And I think, you know, it's a difficult question about the political system, you know, that you brought up, Stephen, and you know, there's a lot of things that feel wildly out of our control that are probably aren't going to change, may not change soon. You know, I'm thinking about swing states and the horrible political, system that we've got, well, it's all over the world and not just America, just, struggles. But the opportunity that you pose in the corporate world, and I think this has happened in America, there have been some really innovative companies that have come out and shown the way and led the way. And that the work that you're talking about doing with Conscious Accelerator to have impact, where we can have impact on those companies and truly affect thousands and thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people at those companies, because those leaders can, in fact, on a dime, make decisions. They actually could change today. They actually could absolutely change their manner of business today. And there's no political system to change. And so if they do that, and lead the way, then I think, then we will see the rest follow. So I think
it creates a groundswell.
Yeah.
It creates a groundswell. And then it also shows models of, okay, you can do transformation from the bottom up, top down at the same time. And I'm not talking about leaders. I'm not excluding anyone. I'm talking about leaders as what is the minimum viable thing we can do to activate a rapid shift, a scalable, rapid global shift. And that is leaders who have a direct experience of the things we talk about, the things that we're doing, and the protocols and the diagnostics, and a commitment to, man, who wouldn't want joy, bliss, and happiness for no reason all the time, 24/7? Hello. I mean, I've been pitching this idea now for a month, and I've had 100% yes, because I'm sick and tired of suffering for no reason all the time. I'm sick of it.
Yeah,
I'm done, and we're all done.
Yeah, and
this is just like the crescendo, right? And a lot of things will change just as a result of the system being unsustainable. The question is, hopefully it's not too damaging along the way in terms of the shift, but it is too easy to get caught up and being addicted to what's the current, corona rate and what's happening with airlines. And I mean, can you do anything about it? Why are you doing that? Do you understand that it's taking up your psychic energy? Do you understand that? And when you're doing that, you're not doing that, and it's got to be that present. And I get it. I understand. I have 51 years of programming in one way of being that I have to undo. And it's fine. But it's all grist for the mill. And it's, when you get the breakthroughs, there's nothing more important. And no $1 million plus exit does not compare to the breakthroughs. I like to kind of talk about, I had one exit. That's what it's technically called. When you get acquired, you have an exit. Yeah, I've done an exit. But this exit, the exit of getting out of here, is much more valuable and meaningful and rewarding than anything else. Not just for me, but for everyone else.
And it touches every single person you interact with every day.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And what's really interesting is what the sales pitch is for Conscious Accelerator? My happiness. People, yesterday I ran into a few people who I haven't seen in about a year, and they said, "Oh, I didn't recognize you. You look younger," or whatever it was. And I went, I just started laughing. I said, "Really? I haven't looked in the mirror." Because I don't care. I don't care. It's not important. I can't control how you see me. So I'm not going to worry about that. Yeah.
So beautiful. So
yeah, it really is beautiful. I think you're in a state of what I'd call business samadhi, Constantine.
It's a new term, is it not?
I don't know whether that's a term or not, but we'll make it up. Where you're constantly realizing that flow state, you're constantly realizing, yep, it doesn't matter, and there's a sense of timelessness about what you're doing. And you might get in the car for a meeting, and suddenly you realize the meeting's not so important, and then you realize you're going to be on time anyway. There's this wonderful sense of flow, and you realize how much you're not in control. and you surrender to that. I mean, that then you start to cultivate that as, and so this comes back to education. It's something I always love listening to Dalai Lama talk about, is that, you know, it comes back to the education and the fact that we don't have enlightened leaders. We've got to take that on ourselves. The reason we don't have enlightened leaders is because we haven't committed to an education system that really directly deals with understanding first what enlightened leaders are and understanding business samadhi, and then making that a direct experience, making that important for humanity, and then cultivating that direct experience to such an extent that there becomes a realization. I mean, it's only ourselves that we can blame for the lack of unenlightened leaders. We put them there, so we're responsible. So we've got to actually overturn everything, you know. So that's the,
you know, and it's something that, like, you reminded me of something like mental health is to knowledge workers as physical health is to laborers. So even if you bring it down to the pragmatic, you know, that statement itself always captures the attention of execs when I say that, because they kind of go, oh yeah, of course. So, okay, you know, you might have an allergic reaction to languages of spirituality based. All right, let me talk neuroscience and biohacking and blah, 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 Trojan horse stuff. You know, but the reality is that everything that we do today, especially in the new economy and the future economy, is knowledge based. Yeah. So what are we doing about maturing our mental health? You know, at a simple way to communicate that. And, you know, backing the collective brains trust and healthy and brains health trust in an organization it's got to net a return. I'm always, you know, conscious that, you know, I do talk about these corporate languages, but it's important because if we're going to make a shift, if we can appease the bean counters and the decision makers in an organization who are typically, you know, tough to deal with, if you can appease them, you can transform a company. So showing the bottom line impact on productivity, you know, mindfulness-based practices, programs, that, especially the one that is Search Inside Yourself that Google has been running for quite some time, shows a 62 minutes a week return in productivity simply by doing 10-minute meditations a day.
Yeah, I agree.
It's on productivity. Productivity is just one level, right? We don't just need productivity now, because I think productivity has gone out the wazoo as a result of, you know, our Zoom lives, but it's about creativity and innovation, and about not just technical innovation, business model innovation, or collaboration engagement model innovation. You know, this is the opportunity that's at hand right now. This is a historical moment. This is a time when all of us can look at things differently and say, okay, well, that's pre-corona, post-corona, or, you know, well, what are we going to do differently? What's the opportunity here? How do we raise all boats?
Yeah, agree with you. Awaken humanity. There is a whole different realization. You know, you reminded me of, you know, how important research is and being able to share research. So what you said about productivity, it reminded me of a good friend of mine, John Kehoe, who was, you know, when he was out of work years ago, he went into the woods and he came up with an idea to launch Mind Power, because he realized, same as you, we've got to pay attention to the mind and the brain and nurture it. And so he had this, you know, simple idea of being able to visualize, feel, and affirm that certain practices in corporate culture that would really help to liberate people. And he went into quite a large company in Canada, and he offered to them that he said, you're not going to have to pay me a thing, but at the end of a year, if I can increase your sales by whatever it happened to be, 10%, and you're going to give me 1% of that, which of course amounted to a large amount of money. And they didn't believe he could do it. And sure enough, he did, by simply changing this by paying attention to the habits of mind and paying attention to the obstacles of mind and learning how to get through them. And anyway, the point is that he then researched that, shared that with other companies. They bought into the whole thing, and he went on to become extremely famous as a result. And it was because he really paid attention to the element of research and how important it is to be able to show the company for, in terms of bottom line, that you can assist productivity or retention or sales or, all the different factors that play a part in the culture. And so you reminded me, of how important within a company culture when you establish this. So going back to the practices, how important it is to establish one taste, because there is no doubt that we have really strong habits in mind that keep drawing us back to our old habitual patterns. So let's call it the pre-corona patterns of unawakened mind, and the old habitual patterns of identity and so on. And if you can take time every day in a company culture, not just to have sales meetings, but have pointing out meetings where you're actually giving people reminders, you're allowing them to glimpse again and again the view, so that they actually establish that. Because a simultaneous mind and heart, a merged mind and heart, or bringing the mind into the heart, as you suggested earlier, it needs practice. It needs a model that enlightened leaders engage in, and that we create. So those kinds of, that kind of embedding in company culture is so incredibly important, so that then these productivity models or sales models or retention models or whatever it is, you can prove it. You can say, look, these simple glimpses that we've brought into your company again and again, they have actually made this percentage difference in your bottom line or in your net profit or whatever it happens to be.
And I think, right now is a really good time, and I'm just again a little bit of data. So in my exposure in the last month of positioning, the new venture, I've been amazed at the response, not only during the pitch, but what happens afterwards. And without asking for anything, they'll include me. They'll include their leadership team. Let's have a conversation. This is perfect timing. This is the response. Yeah, let's have a conversation. This is perfect timing. Where we need something new. We need to harmonize our team. We need to look after our people. This is the feedback. We need to improve our resilience capacity. But you're not going to do it using what you did pre-corona, right? And I think that this slowdown is also, has taken to some extent, not everyone, a lot of people are under a lot of pressure, and I feel for them. But you're not going to solve the problem with the same level of consciousness that it was created. There is an opportunity for you to, look at the one that is experiencing the suffering. And I mean, entrepreneurial suicide was already on the rise prior to corona, but it's going to be worse now. Hence, why if anyone on this call wants to learn about founder resilience, which I believe is a unique type of resilience, DM me. It's been a real big passion of mine in my own journey personally. And for the last 4 years, have been teaching founder resilience specifically, and it addresses the four key dimensions of adaptability, awareness, resilience, leadership, and sustainability. And so we've got to get through this together, and we've got to do this through interoception and the development of metacognition, not reacting but responding. Asking for help. This is the other thing. Thank you. Leadership is a lonely sport. Leadership is a lonely sport, and that's why I wanted to kick off with compassion for leadership, because they're on their own. We adopt this that individual identity adopts I'm holier than thou, and I'm the all-seeing, all-knowing oracle with all the answers. I see that in entrepreneurs who were has never done anything before, for $5,000 in a website, they're an entrepreneur, and all of a sudden they're a CEO of one. And the arrogance that just comes from that, and the lack of coachability, lack of openness, lack of curiosity. I know what the world wants, and I'm just going to spend 6 months in my mother's garage, and bang, here you go, without any validation in market, without any feedback, without anything. I lost my train of thought for a sec there, but so it's a lonely sport. It's a lonely sport, and we need to tap into that if we're going to access and help leaders become more conscious and say, I know it's lonely. I know it's not safe to show vulnerability as a leader because you think that, people are going to judge you or you're going to lose your staff. But the opposite is true. The opposite is true.
Constantine, I truly agree with you that Conscious Accelerator is actually a support for enlightened leaders. It's the support for that lonely road and leaders who don't know who to reach out to. So in effect, that's who the Conscious Accelerator is reaching out to. And I also totally agree, just as, because I realize we're heading towards closing here, but just as a, to really support what you've said and what Holly's said as well, that the Conscious Accelerator and conscious leadership are truly about the new awakened awareness post-corona, and then practice, passion. You've mentioned passion, and compassion. So practice, passion, compassion. If that is the new enlightened leadership model, it is really how you sit. It's how you walk the path. It's how you bring it into reality. So I really want to thank you for your comments today. They've been so insightful. And it's really very beautiful insight.
And it's just, I don't have all the answers. I've just been exposed to a lot more than most people I know. And I've seen, and I've had some great, mentorship from amazing people who've, written books on leadership. And I've spent time with people who at the top of the game in with regards to leadership. But as soon as you shine the light into the dark blind spots, they fall apart. And I said, that's okay. It's opportunity. It's opportunity. So Holly, I just wanted to say thank you so much for this opportunity. And I think, it is something that's topical in terms of what I'm being exposed to. I'm only bringing my insights. This is an invitation for everyone to take a U-turn and question, if I added more awareness to my leadership style, what's the downside? That's a lower last. I'd like to leave it at that.
That's a really, really great place to leave it. And I hate to have to wrap up this beautiful conversation. And, both your insights are so wonderful. Really appreciate your leadership, Constantine, on this issue, and to, having this vision of what a new enlightened leadership could look like. And, the recognition that the system that, got us here is not the system that is the system we need going forward. And that those systems do exist. In fact, they're very ancient systems, ironically. They're not anything that we're inventing. There's something that was figured out a very, very long time ago that we are remembering and resurrecting and teaching and bringing out into the open. And I hope, I hope something that can be widely embraced. Truly, it's really inspirational. The work that you're talking about, the power of that work in my own life, and I've seen with you and other people that it's touched, is phenomenal. It's incredible to see how much it can change your life, and to teach people that, yes, you can have, joy and happiness all the time, that is available. It is available here right now. Not that you won't have sad moments or, not that that's, but that basic underlying level of awareness and joy is available right now. And I think, I think people, frankly, most people have lived so long the other way that they just don't see.
And I get it. Totally get it. And I really have Stephen to help me to thank for that, because I know what the problem is.
Mm-hmm.
If we only showed leaders how to quiet the default mode network.
Yeah.
If only we did that. And I know it's a little bit of an inside thing here, but if we could just quieten the default mode network, then there would be much more creative, much more expansive, and they would have this visceral, embodiment of the things we're talking about. And they'll go, until they do that, though, we have to help them navigate to that state. And
Stephen, I really appreciate you're always sort of coming back to the one humanity and bringing it to the bigger picture, which I know the Dalai Lama shares that one humanity vision as well. And you brought up something earlier that didn't really have a chance to comment on, but, the educational system, and you and I have talked about that, and changing the fundamental educational system. We do not teach children how to work with their minds. This is not a religious issue. This is like, we just don't teach them about their minds. It blows me away that it took until I was, 5 to figure out that I wasn't my thoughts. I mean, because nobody had ever really, shown me and talked to me about, those ideas, and how much it would have changed, just everyday happiness to have had that one fundamental realization, when I was 10 instead of 35. Those default mode network, these really basic working with our minds, and it's, as I said in one of the articles I wrote, it's like we have the most amazing machine in our, we have our brains. It's phenomenal. It's the most amazing, organism on earth. And we don't teach people how to work with it at a broad level, at an educational level, which is,
yeah, that's something. We didn't talk about, but your last HeartMind Happy Hour with those amazing youth leaders blew my mind. I think they've got it down pat. I was questioning whether there was any value in having this session, because that was so amazing. But there is definitely a need to help our youth understand how to upgrade their wetware, I like to call it.
Their wetware?
Yeah.
Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I hate to end this beautiful conversation, but I just really appreciate both of you taking the time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Share your perspective here. It's been really wonderful. And for everybody who has been listening and watching, and who will watch in the future, thank you for tuning in. It's been wonderful to have this opportunity to speak through the miracle of Facebook Live.
Thank you.
Okay.
Where can people find you, Constantine? If people would like to learn more about the work that you do, where can they find you?
Well, at the moment, it's still early stages. I don't even have a website. But the best way is to Constantine Georgiou on LinkedIn is pretty easy, or on Facebook. But LinkedIn is probably easier. So as a beginning, yeah.
I'll put those links in the show notes as well. And Stephen, where can people find you if they'd like to learn more about your work?
Well, as always, they can find Kevin Scheininger and I at raisingourvibration.net, or the Raising Our Vibration community, or here, if you're listening, on the Heart Mind Alchemy. And that's, I was also going to say, I mean, we're Raising Our Vibration are also working with Constantine on assisting the Conscious Accelerator. So anybody who comes to me and asks for Constantine, that's a really easy way to contact Constantine. So I mean, that's what the one humanity is all about us. It's all about letting anybody know that's listening that, you know, you are supported. So if you're one of those lonely leaders, you're absolutely supported by us. And if you're somebody who needs help, you're supported. And if you want to be part of this wonderful family, that's HeartMind, that's raising our vibration, that's the Conscious Accelerator, it's all one. So no matter which one of us you contacted, we would connect you with whoever you wanted to connect with. So, I mean, that's the beauty of truly understanding that concept of one humanity, because we really, truly believe it. We'll give you faith back into the support that humanity can give to you. So definitely contact us. And thank you. Truly deepest gratitude for the opportunity, and love and blessings to everybody in their day. And we dedicate all the merits from and benefits from this wonderful discussion to your liberation. So may you always find peace.
May you always find peace. I love it. I'm going to leave it there. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye.
Bye-bye.